Alleluia, לעולם. Alleluia, ישירו כולם. במילה אחת בוא תודה, הלב מלא בהמון תודה, והולם גם הוא איזה עולם נפלא. הללויה, עם השיר, הללויה, על יום שביעי, הללויה, על מה שהיה ומה שעוד לא היה, הללויה, הללויה, לעולם, הללויה, ישירו כולם, והאם בלילה יהדהדו בהמון צילים, ונקראו הם יאמרו הללויה, 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 עם השיר, הללויה, על יום שביעי, הללויה, על מה שהיה ומה שעוד לא היה, הללויה, הללויה, על הכל, הללויה, מחר ואתמול, הללויה, ותנו ידיך, ישירו כתפיך, הללויה, הללויה, עם השיר, הללויה, על יום שביעי, הללויה, מה שעוד לא היה, הללויה, הללויה, מה שעוד לא היה,
The glorious message of YAOHUSHUA, Hol Mehush Chai, proclaimed by the emissary Mark. Here begins the wonderful tale of YAOHUSHUA, Hol Mehush Chai, the Messiah, Habor, the son of YAOHU'Ul. In the book written by the prophet YAOHUSHUA, or Isaiah, YAOHU'Ul announced that he would send his son to earth and that a special emissary would arrive first to prepare the world for his arrival. This emissary will live out in the barren wilderness, YAOHU said, and will proclaim that everyone must correct and make right his life to be ready for the coming of YAOHU'Ul. This representative was YAOHUCHANAN the Immerser. He lived in the wilderness and taught that all should be immersed as a public announcement of their determination to turn their backs on sin so YAOHUSHUA could forgive them. People from YAOHUSHUA Olam, Jerusalem, and from all over Yehuda, Judea, traveled out into the Judean wastelands to see and hear Yahuchanan, and when they confessed their sins, he immersed them in the Yardayan River. His clothes were woven from camel's hair, and he wore a leather belt. Locusts and wild honey were his food. Here is a sample of his messages. Someone is coming soon who is far greater than I am, so much greater that I am not even worthy to be his servant. I immerse you in water, but he will immerse you in YAOHUSHUA's YAOHUSHUA, or the sanctified spirit of YAOHUSHUA. Then one day, YAOHUSHUA came from Nazareth in Galilee, and was immersed by Yahuchanan there in the Yardayan River. The moment YAOHUSHUA came up out of the water, he saw the heavens open, and the YAOHUSHUA, or sanctified spirit, in the form of a dove, alighting upon him, and a voice from heaven said, "You are my dearly loved Son. You are my delight." Immediately, the YAOHUSHUA urged YAOHUSHUA into the desert. There, for 40 days, alone, except for desert animals, he was subjected to the temptations of Satan to sin. And afterwards, the angels came and cared for him. Later on, after Yahuchanan was apprehended by King Herod, YAOHUSHUA went to Galilee to proclaim YAOHUSHUA's glorious message. At last the time has come, he announced. YAOHUSHUA's kingdom is approaching. Turn from your sins and respond to this glorious message. And one day, as YAOHUSHUA was walking along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, he saw Shamiul and his brother Andron fishing with nets, for they were commercial fishermen. YAOHUSHUA called out to them, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishermen for the souls of men." At once they left their nets and went along, following him. A little farther up the beach, he saw Zebedee's sons, Yahuchanan and Yahuchanan, in a boat mending their nets. He called them too, and immediately they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and went with him. YAOHUSHUA and his companions now arrived at the town of Capharnaum, and on Shabbos morning went into the Yahudi place of worship, the synagogue, where he proclaimed. The congregation was surprised at his message, because he spoke like someone having authority and didn't try to prove his points by quoting others, quite unlike what they were used to healing. A man possessed by a ruqa hara, or an evil spirit, was present, who began yelling, "Why are you bothering us? YAOHUSHUA Nizroti, have you come to ruin us, ruqot haraot, or evil spirits? I know who you are, the holy son of YAOHUSHUA." But YAOHUSHUA curtly commanded the ruqa hara to say no more and to come out of the man. At that, the ruqa hara, or evil spirit, screamed and convulsed the man violently and left him. Amazement gripped the audience, and they began discussing what had happened. "What sort of new religion is this?" they asked excitedly. "Why, even the ruqot haraot, or evil spirits, obey his commands." The report of what he had done spread quickly through that entire area of Galilee. Then, leaving the synagogue, he and his disciples went over to Shamiul and Andoron's home, where they found Shamiul's mother-in-law sick in bed with a high fever. They told YAOHUSHUA about her right away, and he went to her bedside, and as he took her by the hand and helped her to sit up, the fever quickly left, and she rose up and prepared dinner for them. By sunset, the courtyard was filled with the sick and those possessed by evil spirits, brought to him for healing, and a huge crowd of people from all over the city of Capharnaum gathered outside the door to watch. Therefore, YAOHUSHUA healed great numbers of sick folk that evening, and ordered many ruqot haraot, or evil spirits, out of their victims. But he refused to permit the ruqot haraot to speak, because they knew who he was. The next morning he was up long before daybreak, and went out alone into the wilderness to pray. Later, Shamiul and the others went out to find him, and told him, "Everyone is asking for you." But he replied, "We must go on to other towns as well, and give my message to them too, for that is why I came." So he traveled throughout the province of Galilee, proclaiming in synagogues and releasing many from the power of ruqot haraot, or evil spirits. Once a leper came and knelt in front of him and begged to be healed. "If you want to, you can make me well again," he pled. And YAOHUSHUA, moved with pity, touched him and said, "I want to be healed." Immediately the leprosy was gone, and the man was healed. YAOHUSHUA afterward told him seriously, "Go and be examined immediately by the Yahudi priest. Avoid stopping to speak to anyone along the way. Take along the offering prescribed by Yahushua for a leper who is healed, so everyone will have proof that you are well again." But as the man went on his way, he began to shout the amazing report that he was healed. As a result, throngs of people soon surrounded YAOHUSHUA that he couldn't publicly enter a town anywhere but had to remain out in the barren wastelands. And people from everywhere came to him there. Several days later, he, YAOHUSHUA, returned to Capharnaum, and the report of his arrival spread quickly through the city. Soon, the house where he was in was so packed with guests that there wasn't room for a single person more, not even outside the door. And he proclaimed the word to them. 4 men arrived carrying a paralyzed man on a portable bed. They couldn't get to YAOHUSHUA through the crowd, so they dug through the clay roof above his head and lowered the sick man on his portable bed right down in front of YAOHUSHUA. When YAOHUSHUA saw how mightily they believed that he would help, YAOHUSHUA said to the sick man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." But some of the Yahudim religious leaders said to themselves as they sat observing there, "What? This is blasphemy. Does he really think he is the Almighty Creator? For only the Most High can forgive sins." YAOHUSHUA could discern their thoughts and said to them at once, "Why does this bother you? I, Paul Mehushchai, the Messiah, have the authority on earth to forgive sins. But talk is cheap. Anybody could claim that. So I'll prove it to you by healing this man." Then, turning to the paralyzed man, he commanded, "Pick up your beddings and go on home, for you are healed." The man jumped up, took his beddings, and pushed his way through the shocked onlookers. Then how they praised YAOHUSHUA. "We've never seen anything like this before," they all exclaimed. Then YAOHUSHUA went out to the shore again and proclaimed to the crowds that gathered around him. As he was walking up the beach, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, manning his tax collection booth. "Come with me," YAOHUSHUA told him. "Come, be my disciple." And Levi jumped up to his feet and went along. That night, Levi invited his fellow tax collectors and many other notorious sinners to be his dinner guests, so they could meet YAOHUSHUA and his disciples. There were many men of this type among the crowds that followed him. But when some of the Yahudim religious leaders saw him eating with this man of ill repute, they said to his disciples, "How he can bear it?" to eat with such scum. When YAOHUSHUA heard what they were saying, he told them, "Sick people need the healer, not healthy ones. I haven't come to tell upright people to repent, but the bad ones." Yahuchanem's disciples and the Yahudim leaders sometimes went on fasts, that is, went without food as part of their religion. One day, some people came to YAOHUSHUA and asked why his disciples did not do this too. YAOHUSHUA replied, "Do friends of the bridegroom refuse to eat at the wedding feast? Should they be sad while he is with them? But someday he will be taken away from them, and then they will fast." Besides, fasts displayed to be admired is part of the old way of doing things. It is like patching an old garment with unshrunk cloth. What happens? The patch pulls away and leaves the holes worse compared to what it was before. You know better than to put new wine into old wineskins. They would burst. The wine would be spilled out and the wineskins ruined. New wine needs fresh wineskins. Another time on a Shabbos day, as YAOHUSHUA and his disciples were walking through the fields, the disciples were breaking off heads of wheat and eating the grain. Some of the Yahudim religious leaders said to YAOHUSHUA, "They should not be doing that. It's against our laws to work by gathering grain on the Shabbos." But YAOHUSHUA replied, "Didn't you ever hear about the time King Daud and his companions were hungry, and he went into the house of Yahu'u when Abiathar was high priest? They ate the special bread only priests were permitted to eat. That was against the law too. But the Shabbos was made for people's benefit and not the people for the benefit of the Shabbos day. And I, Hol Mehushkai, the Messiah, have the authority even to decide what people can do on Shabbos days." While in Capharnaum, YAOHUSHUA went over to the synagogue again and noticed a man with a deformed hand. Since it was the day of Shabbos, the enemies of YAOHUSHUA observed closely. Would he heal the man's hand? If he did, they planned to arrest him. YAOHUSHUA asked the man to come and arise in front of the congregation. Then, turning to his enemies, he asked, Is it all right to do noble, kind deeds on the days of Shabbos? Or is this a day of doing harm? Is it a day to save lives or to ruin them? But they wouldn't answer him. Looking around at them angrily, for he was deeply bothered by their indifference to human needs, he said to the man, "Reach out your hand." He did, and immediately his hand was healed. At once the Pharisees went away and met with the Herodians to discuss plans for killing YAOHUSHUA. Meanwhile, YAOHUSHUA and his disciples withdrew to the shore, followed by a huge crowd from all over Galilee, Yehuda, YAOHUSHUA Olay, Idumea, from beyond the Jordan River, and even from as far away as Tyre and Sidon. For the report about his miracles had spread far and wide, and large numbers had come to see him for themselves. He told his disciples to bring around a boat and to have it ready nearby, to give him a leeway in case he was crowded off the shore. For there had been many healings that day, and as a result, great numbers of sick people were crowding around him, trying to touch him. And whenever those possessed by ruchot haraot, or evil spirits, caught sight of him, they would fall down before him, shrieking, "You are Habor, the son of Yahushua." But he vehemently warned them not to make him known. Afterwards, he went up into the hills and called some people he selected, inviting them to come and be with him there. And they did. Then he finally selected 12 of them to be his regular companions, and to go out to proclaim the glorious message and to drive out ruchot haraot, or evil spirits. These are the names of the 12 he selected: Shamiul, he renamed him later, Yahuchaf and Yahuchanan, the sons of Zebedee, but YAOHUSHUA called them the sons of thunder. Anderon, Philip, Bartholomew, Manyahu, Thomas, Yahuchaf, the son of Alphaeus, Yehuda, and Shamiul, a member of the political party advocating the violent overthrow of the Roman government, and Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him. When he returned where he was lodged, the crowds began to gather again, and soon it was so full of guests that he couldn't find time to even eat. When his family heard what was happening, they came to try to take him home with them. "He's out of his mind," they said. But the Yehudim leaders of religion who had arrived from YAOHUSHUA Olayim, or Jerusalem, said, "The problem with him is that he's possessed by Hasatan, the chief of Ruchot Haraot, or evil spirits. That's why the Ruchot Haraot obey him. YAOHUSHUA called these men and asked them, using proverbs they all knew, "How can Hasatan drive out Hasatan? A kingdom divided against itself will collapse, and a home filled with internal conflict and division ruins itself." And if Hasatan is fighting against himself, how can he achieve anything? He would never survive. Hasatan must be bound before his Ruchot Haraot can be driven out, just like a powerful man must be tied up before his house can be ransacked and his property robbed. I solemnly declare that any sin can be forgiven, even blasphemy against me. But blasphemy against the Ruach YAOHUSHUA, or against the sanctified spirit of Yahuwah, can never be forgiven. It is the eternal kind of sin. He told them this because they were saying he did his miracles by the power of Hasatan, and not acknowledging it was by the power of the Ruach YAOHUSHUA. Now his mother and brothers arrived at the crowded house where he was lecturing, and they sent word for him to come out and talk with them. "Your mother and brethren are outside. They want to see you," he was informed. And he replied, "Who is my mother? Who are my brethren?" And looking at those around him, he said, "These are my mother and brethren. Anyone who does Yahuwah's will is my brother and my female sibling and my mother." Once again, an immense crowd gathered around him on the beach as he was lecturing, so he went into a boat and sat upon it, and then began to talk from there. His usual way of teaching was to tell the people parables, and one of them went like this: "Take heed. A farmer went to sow some grain. As he scattered throughout his field, some of it fell on a path, and the birds came and picked it off the hard ground and ate it. Some fell on thin soil with underlying rock. It grew up quickly enough, but soon wilted beneath the hot sun and died because the roots had no nourishment in the shallow soil. Other seeds fell among thorns that shot up and crowded the young plants. Therefore, they didn't bear any grain. But some of the seeds fell into fertile soil and yielded 30 times as much as he had planted, some of it even 60 or 100 times as much." If you have ears, take heed. Afterwards, when he was along with the 12 and with other of his disciples, they asked him, "What does your parable mean?" He replied, "You are permitted to know some truths about the kingdom of YAOHUSHUA that are hidden to those outside the kingdom. Though they see and hear, they will not comprehend or turn to YAOHUSHUA or be forgiven for their sins. But if you can't comprehend this simple example, what will you do about all the others I'm going to tell you?" The farmer I talked about is anyone who brings YAOHUSHUA's message to others, trying to plant select seed within their lives. The hard pathway where some of the seed fell represents hard hearts of some of those who hear YAOHUSHUA's message, after which Satan comes at once to try to make them forget it. The rocky soil represents the hearts of those who hear the message with delight, but like some young plants in such soil, their roots never go very deep, and though at first they get along fine, as soon as persecution begins, they wilt. The thorny ground represents the hearts of people who give heed to the glorious message and receive it, but all too quickly the attractions of the world and the delights of wealth and the search for success and allure of attractive things come in and crowd out YAOHUSHUA's message from their hearts, so no crop is yielded. But the fertile soil represents the hearts of those who truly accept YAOHUSHUA's message and yield a plentiful harvest for YAOHUSHUA, 30, 60, even 100 times as much as was planted in their hearts. And then he asked them, "When someone lights a lamp, does he put a box over it to shut out the light? Absolutely not. The light couldn't be seen or used. A lamp is placed upon a holder to shine and be useful. All that is now hidden will someday come to light. If you have ears, take heed, and be sure to put into practice what you hear. The more you do this, the more you will comprehend what I tell you. To him who has shall be given, from him who has not shall be taken away even what he has." Here is one more tale exemplifying what the kingdom of YAOHUSHUA is like. A farmer sowed his field and went away, and as the days went by, the seeds grew and grew without his help. For the soil made the seeds grow. First, a leaf blade pushed out, and later the wheat heads formed, and finally the grain ripened. And then the farmer came at once with his sickle and reaped it. YAOHUSHUA asked, "How can I describe the kingdom of YAOHU'Ul? It is like a small seed of kardal. Though this is one of the smallest of seeds, yet it grows to become one of the largest of plants, with long branches where birds can build their nests and take cover." He used many such examples to teach the people as much as they were ready to comprehend. In fact, he taught only by parables in his public lectures, but afterwards, when he was alone with his disciples, he would explain his meaning to them. As evening fell, YAOHUSHUA said to his disciples, "Let's go to the other side of the lake." So they took him just as he was and sailed out, leaving the crowds behind, though other boats followed. But soon a severe tempest arose. High waves began to break into the boat until it was nearly full of water and about to sink. YAOHUSHUA was asleep at the back of the boat with his head upon a cushion, and frantically they wakened him with a shout, "Molchi'ul! Don't you even care that we are all about to drown?" Then he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Quiet down." And the wind fell, and there was a great calm. And he asked them, "Why were you so afraid? Don't you even yet have confidence in me?" And they were filled with awe and said among themselves, "Who is this man that even the winds and seas obey him?" When they arrived at the other side of the lake, a man possessed by evil spirits ran out from a graveyard just as YAOHUSHUA was climbing from the boat. This man lived among the graveyard and had such power that whenever he was put into handcuffs and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the handcuffs from his wrists and smashed the shackles and walked away. No one was powerful enough to subdue him. All day long and through the night he would wander among the tombs and in the wild hills, screaming and cutting himself with sharp pieces of rock. When YAOHUSHUA was yet far out on the water, the man had seen him and had run to meet him and fell down before him. Then YAOHUSHUA spoke to the evil spirit within the man and said, "Come out, you evil spirit." It gave a terrible scream, shrieking, "What are you going to do to me, YAOHUSHUA, Son of the Most High? For his sake, don't torture me." "What is your name?" YAOHUSHUA asked, and the evil spirit replied, "Legion, for there are many of us here within this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some faraway land. Now, as it happened, there was a huge herd of hogs rooting around on the hill above the lake. "Send us into those hogs," the evil spirits begged. And YAOHUSHUA gave them permission. Then the evil spirits came out of the man and entered the hogs, and the entire herd plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned. The herdsmen fled to the nearby towns and countryside, spreading the report as they ran. Everyone rushed out to see for themselves. And a large crowd soon gathered where YAOHUSHUA was, but as they saw the man while he sat by there, fully clothed and perfectly sane, they were frightened. Those who saw what happened were telling everyone about it, and the crowd began pleading with YAOHUSHUA to go away and leave them alone. So he went back into the boat. The man who had been possessed by the evil spirits begged YAOHUSHUA to let him go along, but YAOHUSHUA said, "No." "Go home to your friends," he told him, "and tell them what amazing deeds YAOHU'ul has accomplished for you, and how merciful he has been." So the man began off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to tell everyone about the great deeds YAOHUSHUA had done for him, and they were amazed at his report. When YAOHUSHUA had gone to the other side of the lake by boat, a vast crowd gathered around him on the shore. The leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Yahweh, came and fell down before him, pleading with him to heal his little daughter. "She is at the point of death," he said in desperation. "Please come and lay your hands on her and make her live." YAOHUSHUA went with him, and the crowd thronged behind. In the crowd was a woman who had been sick for 12 years with a hemorrhage. She had suffered much from many doctors through the years and had become poor from paying them, and was no better, but in fact was worse. She had heard all about the wonderful miracles YAOHUSHUA did, and that is why she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his clothes. For she thought to herself, "If I can only touch his clothing, I will be healed." And sure enough, as soon as she had touched him, the bleeding stopped, and she knew she was well. YAOHUSHUA realized immediately that healing power had gone out from him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "All this crowd pressing around you, and you ask who touched you?" But he kept on looking around to see who it was who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the discovery of what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, healed of your disease." While he was yet talking to her, orderlies arrived from YAOHUSHUA's home with the report that it was too late. His daughter was dead, and there was no point in YAOHUSHUA coming now. But YAOHUSHUA ignored their comments and said to YAOHUSHUA, "Don't be afraid. Trust me only." Then YAOHUSHUA halted the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go on with him to YAOHUSHUA's home, except Kaphos, YAOHUKAPH, and YAOHUCHANAN. And when they arrived, YAOHUSHUA found that all was in utter confusion, with relentless weeping and wailing. He went in, then spoke to the people. "Why all this weeping and commotion?" he asked. "This child isn't dead. She is only asleep." They laughed at him in bitter derision, but he told them all to please leave, and taking the little girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples, he went into the room where she was lying. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Get up, little girl." She was 12 years old, and she jumped up and walked around. Her parents just couldn't get over it. YAOHUSHUA told them very solemnly not to tell what had happened, and told them to give her something to eat. Soon afterwards, YAOHUSHUA left that section of the country and returned with his disciples to Nusrot, or Nazareth, his hometown. The next Shabbos, he went to the synagogue to teach, and the people were surprised at his wisdom and his miracles, because he was just a local man like themselves. "He's no better than we are," they said. "He's just a carpenter, Mauro M's child, a brother of YAOHUKAPH and YAOHUSAPH, YAOHUDA and Shamiul. And his female siblings live right here among us." And they were offended. Then YAOHUSHUA told them, "A prophet is honored everywhere except in his hometown and among his relatives and by his own family." And because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any mighty miracle among them, except to place his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he could hardly accept the fact that they wouldn't believe in him. Then he went out among the villages, teaching. And he called his 12 disciples together, and sent them out 2 by 2, with power to expel evil spirits. He told them to take nothing with them except their walking sticks, no food, no knapsack, no money, not even another pair of footwear or a change of clothes. Remain at one home in each village. Don't shift around from house to house while you are there, he said. And whenever a village won't accept you or hearken to you, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave. It is a sign that you have abandoned it to its fate. So the disciples went out, telling everyone they met to turn from sin. And they drove out many evil spirits and healed many sick people, anointing them with oil. King Herod soon heard about YAOHUSHUA, for his miracles were talked about everywhere. The king thought YAOHUSHUA was YAOHUCHANAN the Immerser, come back to life again. So the people were saying, no wonder he can do such miracles. Others thought YAOHUSHUA was Yaohu, the ancient prophet, now returned to life again. Yet others claimed he was a new prophet like the great ones of the past. No, Herod said, it is YAOHUCHANAN, the man I beheaded. He has come back from the dead. For Herod had sent guards to apprehend and imprison YAOHUCHANAN, because he kept saying it was wrong for the king to marry Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. Herodias wanted YAOHUCHANAN killed in revenge, but without Herod's approval, she was powerless. And Herod respected YAOHUCHANAN, knowing that he was an upright and holy man, so he kept him under his protection. Herod was agitated whenever he talked with YAOHUCHANAN, but even so, he liked to hear what he says. And the chance of Herodias finally came. It was Herod's birthday, and he gave a stag party for his palace aides, army officers, and the leading citizens of Galilee. Then Herodias' daughter came in and danced before them, and highly pleased them all. Ask me for anything you like, the king vowed. Even half of my kingdom I will give it to you. And she went out and consulted her mother, who told her, ask for the head of YAOHUCHANAN the Immerser. She therefore hurried back to the king and told him, I want the head of YAOHUCHANAN the Immerser right now on a tray. Then the king was sorry, but he was embarrassed to break his oath in front of his guests. So he dispatched one of his bodyguards to the prison to cut off YAOHUCHANAN's head and bring it to him. The officer killed YAOHUCHANAN in the prison and brought back his head on a tray, and gave it to the girl, and she took it to her mother. When the disciples of YAOHUSHUA heard what had happened, they came for his body and buried it in a tomb. The emissaries now returned to YAOHUSHUA from their tour and told him all they had done and what they had said to the people they went to. Then YAOHUSHUA said, "Let's get away from the crowds for a while and rest." For so many people were coming and going that they scarcely had time to eat. So they left by boat for a quieter spot. But many people saw them leaving and ran on ahead along the shore and met them as they landed. So the usual vast crowd was there as he stepped from the boat, and he had pity on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he taught them many subjects they needed to know. Late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, "Please tell the people to go away to the nearby villages and farms and buy themselves some food, for there is nothing to eat here in this desolate spot, and it is getting late." But YAOHUSHUA said, "You feed them." "With what?" they asked. "It would take so much to buy food for all this crowd." "How much food do we have?" he asked. "Go and find out." And they came back to report that there were 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Then YAOHUSHUA told the crowd to sit. Soon, colorful groups of 50 or 100 each sat upon the green grass. He took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, gave Hodayao, or thanks for the food. Breaking the loaves into pieces, he gave some of the bread and fish to each disciple to place before the people, and the crowd ate until they could hold no more. There were about 5,000 men there for the meal, and after that 12 basketfuls of scraps were picked up off the grass. Immediately after this, YAOHUSHUA told his disciples to get back into the boat and sail out through the lake to Beit Shuaodai, where he would reunite with them later. He himself would remain and bid the crowds farewell to get them going home. Afterwards, he went up into the hills to pray. During the night, as the disciples in their boat were out in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land, he noticed that they were in serious difficulty, rowing hard and going against the wind and waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, he walked out to them on the water. He was going past them, but when they saw something walking along beside them, they screamed in terror, thinking it was a ghost, for they all saw him. But he spoke to them at once. "It's all right," he said. "It is I. Fear not." Then he climbed into the boat, and the wind stopped. They just sat amazed. They couldn't take it in, for they yet didn't realize who he was, even after the miracle the evening before, for they didn't want to believe. When they arrived at Gan-Nusrot on the other side of the lake, they moored the boat and climbed out. The people watching around there recognized him at once and ran through the whole area to spread the report of his arrival, and began carrying sick folks to him on mats and portable beds. Wherever he went, in villages and cities and out in the farms, they laid the sick in the market plazas and roads and begged him to let them at least touch the fringes of his clothes. And as many as touched him were healed. One day, some YAOHUDIM religious leaders arrived from YAOHUSHUA or Jerusalem to investigate him, and noticed that some of his disciples failed to follow the usual Yahudi or Jewish rituals before eating. For the Yahudim, especially the Parshim or Pharisees, will never eat until they have sprinkled their arms to the elbows, as required by their ancient traditions. So when they come home from the market, they must always sprinkle themselves in this way before touching any food. This is but one of the many examples of laws and regulations they have clung to for years, and do yet follow, just like their ceremony of cleansing for pots, pans, and dishes. So the religious leaders asked him, "Why don't your disciples follow the age-old customs? For they eat without first performing the washing ceremony." YAOHUSHUA replied, "You bunch of hypocrites. Yahu the prophet described you very well when he said, 'These people speak very prettily about Yahuul, but they have no love for him at all. Their worship is a farce, for they claim that Yahuul commands the people to obey their petty rules.'" How right Yahu was, for you ignore Yahuul's definite orders and you replace them with your own traditions. You are simply rejecting Yahuul's laws and trampling them under your feet for the sake of tradition. For example, YAOHUSHUA gave you this law from Yahuul: "Honor your father and mother." And he said that anyone who speaks against his father or mother must die. But you say it is perfectly all right for a person to disregard his needy parents, telling them, "Sorry, I can't help you, for I have given to Yahuul what I could have given to you." And so you break the law of YAOHUSHUA in order to protect your man-made tradition. And this is only one example. There are many, many others. Then YAOHUSHUA called to the crowd to come and hear. "Hearken, all of you," he said, "and try to comprehend. Your souls are not harmed by what you eat, but by what you think and say." Then he went into a house to get away from the crowds, and his disciples asked him what he meant by the statement he had just made. "Don't you comprehend either?" he asked. "Can't you see that what you eat won't harm your soul? For food doesn't come in contact with your heart, but only passes through the digestive system." By saying this, he clarified that every kind of food is kosher, meaning acceptable to eat. And then he added, "It is the thought life that pollutes. For from within, out of people's hearts come evil thoughts of lust, theft, murder, adultery, wanting what belongs to others, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, pride, and all other stupidities. All these vile things come from within. They are what would pollute you and make you unfit for YAOHUSHUA." Then he left Galilee and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and tried to keep it a secret that he was around, but couldn't. For as usual, the report of his arrival spread quickly. Right away, a woman came to him whose little girl was possessed by a ruka hara, or evil spirit. She had heard about YAOHUSHUA, and now she came and fell at his feet and pled with him to release her child from the evil spirit's control. But she was a Syrophoenician, a despised Gentile. YAOHUSHUA told her, "First, I should help my own family, the Yahudim. It isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." And she replied, "That's right, Molkiul, but even the puppies beneath the table are given some scraps from the children's plates." "Well said," he said. "You have answered well, so well that I have healed your little girl. Go on home, for the evil spirit has left her." And when she arrived home, her little girl was lying quietly in bed, and the evil spirit was gone. From Tyre, he went to Sidon, then back to the Sea of Galilee by way of the 10 Towns. A deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him, and everyone begged YAOHUSHUA to lay his hands on the man and heal him. YAOHUSHUA led him away from the crowd, and put his fingers into the man's ears, then spat and touched the man's tongue with the spittle. Then, looking up to heaven, he sighed and commanded, "Yaptak!" Immediately, the man could hear perfectly and speak plainly. YAOHUSHUA told the crowd not to spread the report, but the more he forbade them, the more they made it known, for they were overcome with utter amazement. Again and again they said, "Everything he does is excellent. He even corrects deafness and stammering." One day, about this time, another huge crowd gathered, and the people ran out of food again. YAOHUSHUA called his disciples to discuss the predicament. "I pity these people," he said, "for they have been here 3 days and have nothing left to eat. And if I send them home without feeding them, they will faint along the road, for some of them have come a long way." "Are we supposed to find food for them here in the desert?" His disciples scoffed. "How many loaves of bread do you have?" he asked. "7," they replied. So he told the crowd to sit upon the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves, gave hodayao to YAOHUSHUA for them, broke them into pieces and passed them to his disciples, and the disciples placed them before the people. A few small fish were found too, so YAOHUSHUA also blessed these and told the disciples to serve them. And the whole crowd ate until they were full, and afterwards he sent them home. There were about 4,000 people in the crowd that day, and when the scraps were picked up after the meal, there were 7 very large basketfuls left over. Immediately after this, he went into a boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmanutha. When the local Yahudim leaders learned of his arrival, they came to argue with him. "Do a miracle for us," they said. "Make something happen in the sky. Then we will believe in you." He sighed deeply when he heard this, and he said, "Absolutely not. How many more miracles do you people need?" So he went back into the boat and left them, went to the other side of the lake, but the disciples had neglected to stock up on food before they left, and had only 1 loaf of bread in the boat. As they were sailing, YAOHUSHUA said to them very solemnly, "Beware of the yeast of King Herod and of the Pharisees." "What does he mean?" the disciples asked one another. They finally concluded that he must be talking about their neglecting to bring bread. YAOHUSHUA realized what they were discussing and said, "No, that isn't it at all. Can't you comprehend? Are your hearts too dense to take it in? Your eyes are to see with. Why don't you look? Why don't you open your ears and take heed? Don't you recall anything at all? What about the 5,000 men I fed with 5 loaves of bread? How many basketfuls of scraps did you pick up afterwards? 12, they said. And when I fed the 4,000 with 7 loaves, how much was left? 7 basketfuls, they said. And yet you think I'm worried that we have no bread? When they arrived at YAOHUSHUA, some people brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch and heal him. YAOHUSHUA took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village and spat upon his eyes and laid his hands over them. Can you now see? YAOHUSHUA asked him. And the man looked around. Yes, he said, I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. They look like tree trunks walking around. Then YAOHUSHUA placed his hands over the man's eyes again, and as the man looked intently, his sight was completely recovered, and he saw everything clearly, drinking in the sights around him. YAOHUSHUA sent him home to his family. Don't even go back to the village first, he said. And YAOHUSHUA and his disciples now left Galilee and went out to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And as they were walking along, he asked them, Who do the people think I am? What are they saying about me? Some of them think you are Yahuchanan the Immerser, the disciples replied, and the others say you are Uli Yahu, or some other ancient prophet come back to life again. And then he asked, Who do you think I am? Caiaphas replied, You are YAOHUSHUA, the Messiah. But YAOHUSHUA warned them not to tell anyone. Then he began to tell them about the terrible experiences he would suffer, and that he would be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the other Yahudim leaders and be killed, and that he would rise again 3 days afterwards. He talked about it quite frankly with them, so Caiaphas took him aside and tried to reprove him. You should not say matters like that, he told YAOHUSHUA. YAOHUSHUA reverted and looked at his disciples and then said to Caiaphas very severely, Get behind me, Hasatan! You are looking at this only from a human point of view and not from Yahuwah's. Then he called his disciples and the crowds to come over and to take heed. If any of you wants to be my follower, he told them, you must put aside your own pleasures and bear your own stake and follow me closely. If you insist upon saving your life, you will lose it. Only those who throw away their lives for my sake and for the sake of the glorious message, will ever know what it means to really live. And how does a man benefit, even if he gains the whole world, but loses his own soul in the process? For is anything worth more than his soul? And anyone who is ashamed of me and my message in these days of unbelief and sin, I, YAOHUSHUA, the Messiah, will be ashamed of him also when I return in the glory of my YAOHUSHUA with the holy angels. YAOHUSHUA went on to say to his disciples, "Some of you who are arisen here right now will live to see the kingdom of YAOHUSHUA arrive in great power." 6 days later, YAOHUSHUA took Cephas, YAOHUKAF, and YAOHUKANAM to the top of a mountain. No one else was around. Unexpectedly and quickly, his face began to shine with glory, and his clothing became dazzling white, far more brighter than any earthly process could ever make it. Then Eliyahu and Yahushua appeared and began talking with YAOHUSHUA. "Mauro, this is magnificent," Cephas explained. "We will make 3 tabernacles here, one for each of you." He said this just to be talking, for he didn't know what else to say, and they were all terribly frightened. But while he was yet speaking these words, a cloud covered them, blotting out the sun, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved Son. Hearken to him." Then quickly they looked around, and Yahushua and Eliyahu were gone, and only YAOHUSHUA was with them. As they went down the mountainside, he told them never to mention what they had seen until after he had risen from the dead. So they kept it to themselves, but often talked about it and wondered what he meant by rising from the dead. Now they began asking him about something the Yahudim religious leaders often spoke of, that Eliyahu must come back before YAOHUSHUA could arrive. YAOHUSHUA agreed that Eliyahu must come first to prepare the way, and that he had, in fact, already come, and that he had been terribly persecuted, just as the prophets had predicted. Then YAOHUSHUA asked them what the prophets could have been talking about when they predicted that YAOHUSHUA would suffer and be treated with utter contempt. At the bottom of the mountain, they met a huge crowd surrounding the other 9 disciples, as some Yahudim leaders argued with them. The crowd watched YAOHUSHUA in awe as he came toward them, and then ran to greet him. "What's all the argument about?" he asked. One of the men in the crowd spoke up and said, Mauro or teacher, I brought my son for you to heal. He can't talk because he is possessed by an evil spirit. And whenever the evil spirit is in control of him, it dashes him to the ground and makes him foam at the mouth and grind his teeth and become rigid. So I begged your disciples to drive out the evil spirit, but they couldn't do it. And YAOHUSHUA said to his disciples, Oh, what little faith you have! How much longer must I be with you until you believe? How much longer must I be patient with you? Bring the lad to me. So they brought the lad, but when he saw YAOHUSHUA, the evil spirit convulsed the child horribly, and he fell to the ground, writhing and foaming at the mouth. How long has he been this way? YAOHUSHUA asked the father, and he replied, Since he was very small, and the evil spirit often makes him fall into the fire or into water to kill him. Oh, have mercy on us and do something if you can. If I can? YAOHUSHUA asked. Anything is possible if you have faith. And the father quickly replied, I do have faith. Oh, please, help me to have more. When YAOHUSHUA saw the crowd was going, he rebuked the evil spirit. You evil spirit of deafness and dumbness, he said, I command you to come out of this child and enter him no more. Then the evil spirit screamed terribly and convulsed the lad again and left him, and the lad lay there limp and motionless, to all appearances dead. And a murmur ran through the crowd, He is dead. But YAOHUSHUA took him by the hand and helped him to his feet, and he rose up and was all right. Afterwards, when YAOHUSHUA was alone in the house with his disciples, they asked him, Why couldn't we drive the evil spirit out? And YAOHUSHUA replied, Cases like this require prayer. Leaving that region, they traveled through Galilee, where he tried to avoid all publicity so he could spend more time with his disciples, teaching them. He would say to them, I, YAOHUSHUA, the Messiah, am going to be betrayed and killed, and 3 days later I will return to life again. But they didn't comprehend and were afraid to ask him what he meant. And so they arrived at Capharnaum. And when they were already in the house where they were to remain, he asked them, What were you discussing about on the road? But they were ashamed to answer, for they had been arguing about which one of them was the greatest. And so he sat, he called them around him and said, Anyone wanting to be the greatest must be the least, the servant of all. Then he placed a little child among them, and taking the child in his arms, he said to them, Anyone who welcomes a little child like this in my shuam, or name, is welcoming me. And anyone who welcomes me is welcoming my YAOHUSHUA, or Father, who sent me. One of his disciples, YAOHUSHUA, told him one day, Mauroe, or teacher, we saw a man using your shuam to drive out evil spirits, but we told him not to, for he isn't one of our group. Don't forbid him, YAOHUSHUA said, for no one doing miracles in my shuam or name will quickly turn against me. Anyone who isn't against us is for us. If anyone so much as gives you a cup of water because you belong to YAOHUSHUA, I say this solemnly, he won't lose his reward. But if someone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to lose faith, it would be better for that person if a huge mill eban were tied around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. If your hand does wrong, cut it off. Better live forever with one hand than be thrown into the unquenchable fires of hell with two. If your foot carries you toward evil, cut it off. Better be lame and live forever than have 2 feet that carry you to hell. And if your eye is sinful, gouge it out. Better enter the kingdom of YAOHUSHUA half blind than have 2 eyes and see the fires of hell, where the worm never dies and the fire never goes out, where all are salted with fire. Fine salt is worthless if it loses its salty flavor. It can't flavor anything. So never lose your flavor. Live in peace with one another. Then YAOHUSHUA left Capharnaum and went southward to the Judean borders and into the area east of the Yardayan River. And as always, there were the crowds, and as usual, he taught them. Some Pharisees came and asked him, "Do you permit divorce?" Of course, they were trying to trap him. What did YAOHUSHUA say about divorce? YAOHUSHUA asked them. He said it was all right, they replied. He said that all a man has to do is write his wife a letter of dismissal. And why did he say that? YAOHUSHUA asked. I'll tell you why. It was merely permissive on his part in recognition of your hard-hearted wickedness. But it surely isn't YAOHUSHUA's way. For from the very first, he made man and woman to be united together permanently in marriage. Therefore, a man is to leave his father and mother, and he and his wife are united, so they are no longer 2, but 1. And no man may separate what YAOHUSHUA has united together. Later, when he was alone with his disciples in the house, they brought up the subject again. And he told them, when a man divorces his wife to marry someone else, he commits adultery against her. And if a wife divorces her husband and remarries, she too commits adultery. Once, when some mothers were bringing their children to YAOHUSHUA to bless them, the disciples shooed them away, telling them not to bother him. But when YAOHUSHUA saw what was happening, he was very much displeased with his disciples and said to them, "Let the children come to me, for the kingdom of YAOHUSHUA belongs to such as they. Don't send them away. I tell you as seriously as I know how, that anyone who refuses to come to YAOHUSHUA as a little child will never be permitted into his kingdom." Then he took the children into his arms and placed his hands upon their heads, and he blessed them. As he was beginning out on a trip, a man came running to him and knelt down and asked, "Tab Mauro what must I do to get to heaven?" "Why do you call me Tab or noble?" YAOHUSHUA asked. "Only YAOHUSHUA is absolutely Tab. But regarding your query, you know the commandments. Don't kill. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't cheat. And respect your father and mother." "Mauro or teacher," the man replied, "I've never once broken a single one of those laws." And YAOHUSHUA felt a genuine love for this man as he looked at him. "You lack one thing," he told him. "Go and sell all you have and give the money to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me." Then the man's face fell, and he went sadly away, for he was very rich. YAOHUSHUA watched him go, then turned around and said to his disciples, "It's almost impossible for the rich to get into the kingdom of YAOHUSHUA." And this amazed them. Therefore YAOHUSHUA said it again, "Dear children, how hard it is for those who trust upon riches to enter the kingdom of YAOHUSHUA. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of YAOHUSHUA." The disciples were incredulous. "Then who in the world can be saved, if not a rich man?" they asked. And YAOHUSHUA looked at them intently and then said, "Without YAOHUSHUA, it's really impossible. But with YAOHUSHUA, everything is possible." Then Kahos began to mention all that he and the other disciples had left behind. "We've given up everything to follow you," he said. And YAOHUSHUA replied, "Let me assure you that no one has ever given up anything: home, brothers, female siblings, mother, father, children, or property, for love of me, and to tell others the glorious message who won't be given back 100 times over now in this present age: homes, brothers, female siblings, mothers, children, and land, with persecutions though. All this will be his here on earth, and in the world to come he shall have eternal life. But many people who seem to be important now will be the least important then, and many who are treated least significant here shall be greatest there. Now they were on the way to YAOHUSHUA, Jerusalem, and YAOHUSHUA was walking along ahead, and as the disciples were following, they were filled with terror and dread. Taking them aside, YAOHUSHUA once more began describing all that was going to happen to him when they arrived at YAOHUSHUA. When we get there, he told them, I, YAOHUSHUA, the Messiah, will be apprehended and taken before the chief priests and the Yahudim leaders, who will convict me to die and hand me over to the Romans to be killed. They will mock me and spit on me and flog me with their whips and kill me. But after 3 days I will come back to life again. Then YAOHUSHUA and YAOHUSHUA, the sons of Zebedee, came over and spoke to him in a low voice. O Murul, our teacher or ruler, they said, we want you to do us a favor. What is it? He asked. We want to sit upon the thrones next to yours in your kingdom, they said, one at your right and the other at your left. But YAOHUSHUA answered, you don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of sorrow I must drink from? Or to be immersed with the immersion of suffering I must be immersed? Oh yes, they said, we are. And YAOHUSHUA said, you shall indeed drink from my cup and be immersed with my immersion, but I do not have the right to place you on thrones next to mine. Those appointments have already been made. When the other disciples discovered what YAOHUSHUA and YAOHUSHUA had asked, they were very indignant. Therefore, YAOHUSHUA called them to him and said, as you know, the kings and great men of the earth rule it over the people, but among you it is different. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be the greatest of all must be the slave of all. For even I, YAOHUSHUA, the Messiah, am not here to be served, but to help others and to give my life as a ransom for many. And so they reached Jericho. Later, as they left town, a great crowd was following. Now it happened that a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, or the son of Timaeus, was set upon beside the road as YAOHUSHUA was passing by. When Bartimaeus heard that YAOHUSHUA Nuzroti was approaching, he began to shout loudly, "YAOHUSHUA, son of Daud, have mercy on me!" "Shut up," some of the people yelled at him. But he only hollered the louder again and again, "Oh, son of Daud, have mercy on me!" And when YAOHUSHUA heard him, he stopped there in the road and said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "You blessed fellow," they said, "come on, he's calling you." Bartimaeus yanked off his old coat and flung it aside, jumped up, and came to YAOHUSHUA. "What do you want me to do for you?" YAOHUSHUA asked. "Mauroe, or teacher," the blind man said, "I want to see." And YAOHUSHUA said to him, "All right, you can see. Your faith has healed you." And immediately the blind man could see and followed YAOHUSHUA as he went down the road. While they were getting near Bethphage and Beit Anyao, on the outskirts of YAOHUSHUA Olaim, they came to the Mount of Olives. YAOHUSHUA sent 2 of his disciples on ahead. "Go into that village over there," he told them, "and just as you enter, you will see a colt tied up that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it here, and if anyone asks you what you are doing, just simply say, 'Our Molchiul, or ruler, needs it and will return it soon.'" Off went the 2 men and found the colt by the road, tied outside a house. As they were untying it, some who were watching there demanded, "What are you doing, untying that colt?" So they said what YAOHUSHUA had told them to, and then those guys permitted them. So the colt was brought to YAOHUSHUA, and the disciples threw their cloaks on top of its back for him to ride on. Then many in the crowd spread out their coats along the road before him, while others threw down leafy branches from the fields. He was in the middle of the line with crowds ahead and behind, all of them loudly saying, "Hail to the King! Praise YAOHUSHUA for him who comes in the Shuam, or name of YAOHUSHUA. Praise YAOHUSHUA for the return of our father Daud's kingdom. Hail to the King of the universe." And then he entered YAOHUSHUA Olaim and went into the temple. He looked around carefully at everything and then left, for now it was late in the afternoon, and went out to Beit Anyao with the 12 disciples. The next morning, as they left Beit Anyao, he felt hungry. A little way off, he noticed a fig tree in full leaf, so he went over to see if he could find any figs on it. But no, there were only leaves, for it was too early in the year for fruit. Then YAOHUSHUA said to the tree, "You shall never bear fruit again." And the disciples heard him say it. When they arrived back to YAOHUSHUA Olaim, he went to the temple and began to drive out the merchants and their customers, and knocked over the tables of the money changers and the booths of those selling doves, and stopped everyone from bringing in loads of merchandise. He told them, "It is inscribed in the scriptures, 'My temple is to be a place of prayer for all nations,' but you have turned it into a den of thieves." When the chief priests and other Yahudim leaders heard what he had done, they began planning how best to get rid of him. Their problem was their fear of riots, because the people were so eager about the teaching of YAOHUSHUA. That evening, as usual, they left the city. And next morning, as the disciples passed the fig tree he had cursed, they observed that it was withered from the roots. Then Caiaphas remembered what YAOHUSHUA had said to the tree on the previous day and exclaimed, "Look, Mauroe, the fig tree you cursed has now withered." In reply, YAOHUSHUA said to the disciples, "If you only have faith in Yahuwah, you can even say to this Mount of Olives, 'Rise up and fall into the Mediterranean Sea,' and your command will be obeyed." All that's required is that you really believe and have no doubt. Hearken to me. You can pray for anything, and if you believe you have it, it's yours. But when you're praying, first forgive anyone you are holding a grudge against, so your Yahuwah in heaven will forgive you your sins also. By this time, they had arrived in YAOHUSHUA Olaim again, and as he was walking through the temple area, the chief priests and other Yahudim leaders came up to him demanding, "What's going on here? Who gave you the authority to drive out the merchants?" And YAOHUSHUA replied, "I'll tell you if you answer one query. What about Yahuchanan the Immerser? Was he sent by Yahuwah or not? Answer me." They talked it over among themselves. If we reply that Yahuwah sent him, then he will say, "All right, why didn't you accept him?" But if we say Yahuwah didn't send him, then the people will begin a riot. For the people all believed assuredly that Yahuchanan was a prophet. And so they said, "We can't answer that. We don't know." To which YAOHUSHUA replied, "Then I won't answer your query either." Here are some of the parables YAOHUSHUA gave to the people at that time. A man planted a vineyard and built a wall around it, and dug a pit for pressing out the grape juice, and built a watchtower. Then he leased out the farm to tenant farmers and moved to another country. At grape picking time, he dispatched one of his men to collect his share of the crop. But the farmers beat up the man and sent him back empty-handed. The owner then dispatched another of his men, who received the same treatment, only worse, for his head was seriously injured. The next man he sent was killed, and later others were either beaten or killed, until there was only one left, his only son. He finally sent him, thinking they would surely give him their full respect. But when the farmers saw him coming, they said, "He will own the farm when his father dies. Come on, let's kill him, and then the farm will be ours." So they caught him and murdered him and threw his body out of the vineyard. What do you suppose the owner will do when he hears what happened? He will come and kill them all and lease out the vineyard to others. Don't you remember reading this passage in the scriptures? The rock the builders threw away became the chief corner boulder, the most valuable boulder in the building. This is YAOHUSHUA's work, and it is an amazing wonder to see. The Yahudim leaders wanted to arrest him then and there for using this example, for they knew he was pointing at them. They were the wicked farmers in his parable. But they were afraid to touch him for fear of a mob. So they left him and went away. But they sent some other religious and political leaders to talk with him and try to trap him into saying something he could be apprehended for. "Maoroe, or teacher," the spy said, "we know you tell the truth no matter what. You aren't influenced by the opinions and desires of men, but truly teach the ways of YAOHUSHUA. Now tell us, is it proper to pay taxes to Rome or not?" YAOHUSHUA discerned their trick and said, "Show me a coin and I'll tell you." And when they handed it to him, he asked, "Whose image and title is this on the coin?" And they replied, "The emperor's." "All right," he said, "if it is his, give it to him. But everything that belongs to YAOHUSHUA must be given to YAOHUSHUA." And they scratched their heads in bafflement at his reply. Then the tzaddikim stepped forward, a group of men who believed that there is no resurrection, and here was the query they asked. "Maoroe, a teacher, Yahushua gave us a law that when a man dies without children, the man's brother should marry his widow and have children in his brother's name. Well, there were 7 brothers, and the oldest married and died and left no children. So the second brother married the widow, but soon he died too, and left no children. Then the next brother married her and died without children, and so on until all were dead, and yet there were no children. And last of all, the woman died too." What we want to know is this: in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? For she had been the wife of each of them. And YAOHUSHUA replied, "Your trouble is that you don't know the scriptures, and you don't know the power of YAOHU'UL. For when the 7 brothers and the woman rise from the dead, they won't be married, they will be like the angels. But now, as to whether there will be a resurrection, have you never read in the scriptures about YAOHUSHUA and the burning bush?" YAOHU'UL said to YAOHUSHUA, "I am YAOHU'UL, the all-powerful eternal creator of Abraham. I am the YAOHU'UL of YAOHUSHUA, and I am YAOHU'UL of YAOHUSHUA." YAOHU'UL was telling YAOHUSHUA that these men, though dead for hundreds of years, were yet very much alive, for he would not have said, "I am YAOHU'UL of people who don't exist." You have made a very serious error. One of the teachers of religion who was arisen there, hearing the discussion, realized that YAOHUSHUA had answered well. So he asked, "Of all the commands, which is the most important?" And YAOHUSHUA replied, "The one that says, 'Hear, YAOHUSHUA, Yaohu, our Ul, is the one and only Creator, and you must love Him with all your heart, soul, mind, and might.' And the second is, you must love others as much as yourself. No other commands are greater than this." And the teacher of religion said, "Maor, sir, you have spoken a true word in saying that there is only one Creator and no other. And I know it is far more important to love Him with all my heart and comprehension and vigor, and to love others as myself, than to offer all kinds of sacrifices on the altar of the temple." Realizing this man's comprehension, YAOHUSHUA said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of YAOHU'UL." And after that, no one dared ask him any more queries. Later, as YAOHUSHUA was teaching the people in the temple area, he asked them this query: "Why do your religious teachers claim that YAOHUSHUA, or the Messiah, must be an offspring of King Daud? For Daud himself declared, and the YAOHUSHUA, or sanctified spirit, was speaking through him when he said it, 'YAOHU'UL said to my Od Murul, sit by my right hand until I make your enemies your footrest.' Since Daud called him his Od Murul, or ruler and teacher, how can he be his son?" This sort of logic delighted the crowd, and they hearkened to him with great eagerness. Here are some of the other matters he taught them at this time. "Beware of the teachers of religion, for they love to wear the robes of the rich and scholarly, and to have everyone bow to them as they walk through the markets. They love to take the best seats in the synagogues and at the places of honor at banquets, but they shamelessly cheat widows out of their homes, and then, to cover up the kind of men they really are, they pretend to be pious by praying long prayers in public. Because of this, their punishment will be more severe. Then he went over to the collection boxes in the temple and sat. He watched as the crowds dropped in their money. Some who were rich put in large amounts. Then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 cents. He called his disciples to him and remarked, "That poor widow has given more than all those rich men put together. For they gave a little of their excess fat, while she gave up her last cent." As he, YAOHUSHUA, was leaving the temple that day, one of his disciples said, "Maoroe," or teacher, "what beautiful buildings these are! Look at the impressive murals on the walls." YAOHUSHUA replied, "Yes, look, for not one boulder will be left upon another, except as ruins." And as he sat upon the slopes of the Mount of Olives, opposite the valley from YAOHUSHUA Ole, Paphos, YAOHUKAF, and YAOHUKANAN, and Andoron went alone with him and asked him, "When is all this going to happen to the temple? Will there be some warning ahead of time?" Therefore, YAOHUSHUA launched into a long reply. "Don't let anyone mislead you," he said, "for many will come declaring themselves to be your Messiah, and will lead many into error. And wars will break out near and far, but this is not the signal of the end time. For nations and kingdoms will proclaim war against each other, and there will be earthquakes in many lands and famines. These herald only the early stages of the anguish ahead. But when these events begin to happen, watch out, for you will be in grave danger. You will be dragged before the courts and beaten in the synagogues, and accused before governors and government authorities of being my followers. This is your opportunity to tell them the glorious message. And the glorious message must first be made known in every nation before the end time finally comes. But when you are apprehended and undergo trial, don't worry about what to say in your defense. Just say what Yahuwah tells you to. Then you will not be speaking, but the Ruach YAOHUSHUA, or the sanctified Spirit of Yahuwah, will. Brothers will betray each other to death. Fathers will betray their own children, and children will betray their parents to be killed. And everyone will hate you because you acknowledge my Shuam, or name. but all who endure to the end without renouncing me shall be saved. When you see the horrible thing there arisen in the temple, reader, take note, flee if you can to the Judean hills. Hurry! If you are on your rooftop porch, don't even go back into the house. If you are out in the fields, don't even return for your money or clothes. Woe to pregnant women in those days and to mothers nursing their children. And pray that your flight will not be in winter. For those will be the days of such horror as have never been since the beginning of YAOHUSHUA's creation, nor will ever be again. And unless YAOHUSHUA cuts short that time of calamity, not a soul in all the earth will survive. But for the sake of his elect ones, he will limit those days. And then if anyone tells you, this is the Messiah, or that one is, never hearken to them at all. For there will be many false messiahs and false prophets who will do amazing miracles that would deceive, if possible, even YAOHUSHUA's own children. Take care, I have warned you. After the tribulation ends, then the sun will go dim, and the moon will not shine, and the evening heavenly lights will fall. The heavens will convulse. Then all mankind will see me, YAOHUSHUA, the Messiah, coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And I will send forth the angels to gather together my elect ones from all over the world, from the farthest bounds of the earth and heaven. Now here is a lesson from a fig tree. When its buds become tender and its leaves begin to sprout, you know that spring has come. And when you see these events happening that I've just described, you can be very sure that my return is very near, that I am right at the door. Yes, these are the events that will signal the end of this age. Heaven and earth shall disappear, but my words will remain forever true. However, no one, not even the angels in heaven nor I myself, knows the day or hour when these events will occur. Only YAOHUSHUA knows. And since you know not when it will happen, always remain alert then. Be always on watch for my return. My arrival can be compared with that of a man who went on a trip to another country. He laid out his employees' work for them to do while he was gone, and told the gatekeeper to watch for his return. Keep a sharp lookout, for you don't know when I will come, at evening, at midnight, early dawn, or late daybreak. Don't let me find you sleeping. Watch for my return. This is my message to you and to everyone else. The Paschal or Passover observance began 2 days later, an annual Yahudi holy day when no bread with yeast was taken. The chief priests and other Yahudim leaders were yet looking for an opportunity to arrest YAOHUSHUA secretly and put him to death. But we can't do it during Paschal, they said, or there will be a riot. Meanwhile, YAOHUSHUA was in Beit Anyau at the home of Shamiul the leper, and during supper, a woman came in with a beautiful flask of expensive perfume. Then, breaking the seal, she poured it lavishly over his head. Some of those at the table were indignant among themselves about this waste, as they called it. Why, she could have sold that perfume for a huge amount and given the money to the poor, they snarled. But YAOHUSHUA said, "Let her alone. Why berate her for doing a noble deed? You always have the poor among you, and they badly need your help, and you can help them whenever you want to. But I won't be here much longer." She has carried out what she could and has really anointed my body ahead of time for my burial. And I tell you this in solemn truth, that wherever the glorious message is proclaimed throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and praised. Then Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, went to the chief priests to arrange to betray YAOHUSHUA to them. When the chief priests heard why he had come, they were thrilled and happy and promised him a reward. So he began looking for the right time and place to betray YAOHUSHUA. On the first day of Paschal, or Passover, the day the lambs were sacrificed, his disciples asked him where he wanted to go to eat the traditional Paschal or Passover supper. He sent 2 of them into YAOHUSHUA Olaim, or Jerusalem, to make the arrangements. "As you are walking along," he told them, "you will see a man coming toward you carrying a pot of water. Follow him. At the house he enters, tell the man in charge, 'Our old Murul told us to see the room you have ready for us, where we will eat the Paschal supper this evening.' And he will take you to a large room all set up in the upper level. Prepare our supper there." So the 2 disciples went on ahead into the city and found everything as YAOHUSHUA had said, and they prepared the Paschal. In the evening, YAOHUSHUA arrived with the other disciples, and as they reclined around the table eating, YAOHUSHUA said, "I solemnly declare that one of you will betray me, one of you who is here eating with me." A veil of gloom swept over them, and one by one they asked him, "Am I the one?" And he replied, "It is one of you 12 eating with me now. I must die, as the prophets declared long ago, but oh, the misery ahead for the man by whom I am betrayed. Oh, that he had never been born." As they were eating, YAOHUSHUA took bread and asked YAOHU's blessing on it, and broke it in pieces, and gave it to them, and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took the cup of wine and gave Hodayaw to YAOHU for it, and gave it to them, and they all drank from it. And he said to them, "This is my dam of blood, poured out for many, sealing the new covenant between YAOHU and man. I solemnly declare that I shall never again take wine until the day I drink a different kind in the kingdom of YAOHU." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. "All of you will desert me," YAOHUSHUA told them, "for YAOHU has declared through the prophets, I will slay the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. But after I am raised to life again, I will go to Galilee and meet you there." Caiaphas said to him, "I will never desert you, no matter what the others do." "Caiaphas," YAOHUSHUA said, "before the cock crows a second time tomorrow morning, you will deny me 3 times. "No," Caiaphas exploded, "not even if I have to die with you, I'll never deny you." And all the others vowed the same. And now they came to an olive grove called the Garden of Gethsemane, and he told his disciples, "Sit by here while I go and pray." He took Shamiul Caiaphas, YAOHU and YAOHU with him, and began to be filled with horror and deepest grief. And he said to them, "My soul is crushed by sorrow to the point of death. Remain here and watch with me." He went on a little further and fell to the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the awful hour awaiting him might never come. "YAOHU Abi," he said, "everything is possible for you. Please take away this cup from me, yet I want to do your will and not mine." Then he returned to the 3 disciples and found them asleep. "Caiaphas," he said, "asleep? Couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Watch with me and pray, lest the tempter overpower you. For though the spirit is willing, yet the body is weak." And he went away again and prayed, repeating his pleadings. Again he returned to them and found them sleeping, for they were very tired, and they didn't know what to say. The 3rd time when he returned to them, he said, "Sleep on, get your rest." But no, the time for sleep has ended. Look, I am betrayed into the hands of wicked men. Come, get up, we must go. Look, my betrayer is here. And immediately, while he was yet speaking, Judas, one of his disciples, arrived with a mob equipped with swords and clubs, sent out by the chief priests and other Yahudim leaders. Judas had told them, "You will know which one to arrest when I go over and greet him. Then you can take him easily." So as soon as they arrived, he walked up to YAOHUSHUA. "Od Murul," he exclaimed, and embraced him with a great show of friendliness. Then the mob seized YAOHUSHUA and held him fast. But someone pulled a sword and slashed at the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. YAOHUSHUA asked them, "Am I some dangerous robber that you come like this, armed to the teeth to capture me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was over there teaching every day. But these events are happening to fulfill the prophecies about me." Meanwhile, all his disciples had fled. There was, however, a young man following along behind, clothed only in a linen nightshirt. When the mob tried to grab him, he escaped, though his clothes were torn off in the process, so he ran away completely naked. YAOHUSHUA was led to the high priest's home, where all of the chief priests and the other Yahudim leaders soon gathered. Caiaphas followed far behind and then slipped inside the gates of the house of the high priest and crouched beside the fire among the servants. Inside, the chief priests and the whole Yahudim Supreme Court were trying to find something against YAOHUSHUA that would be sufficient to condemn him to death. But their efforts were in vain. Many false witnesses volunteered, but they contradicted each other. Finally, some men rose up to lie about him and said, "We heard him say, 'I will ruin this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days I will build another made without human hands.'" But even they didn't get their reports in agreement with one another. Then the high priest arose before the court and asked YAOHUSHUA, "Do you refuse to answer this charge? What do you have to say for yourself?" To this, YAOHUSHUA made no reply. Then the high priest asked him, "Are you Paul Nehushai, the Messiah, Habor, the son of Yahuul?" YAOHUSHUA said, "I am, and you will see me on my seat by the right hand of Yahuul and returning to earth in the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore at his clothes and said, "What more do we need? Why wait for witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your conclusion?" And the vote for the verdict of death was unanimous. Then some of them began to spit on him, and they blindfolded him and began to hammer his face with their fists. "Who hit you that time, you prophet?" they jeered. And even the bailiffs were using their fists on him as they led him away. Meanwhile, Caiaphas was below in the courtyard. One of the maids who worked for the high priest noticed Caiaphas warming himself at the fire. And she looked at him closely and then announced, "You are with YAOHUSHUA Nuzroti." Caiaphas denied it. "I don't know what you are talking about," he said, and walked over to the edge of the courtyard. Just at that time, a cock crowed, and the maid saw him there and began telling others, "There he is! There's that disciple of YAOHUSHUA." And Caiaphas denied it again. A little later, others gathered there around the fire began saying to Caiaphas, "You are one of them too, for you are from Galilee." And he began to curse and swear. "I don't even know this fellow you are talking about," he said. And immediately the cock crowed the second time. Quickly, the words of YAOHUSHUA resounded through the mind of Caiaphas. "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he began to weep bitterly. Early in the morning, the chief priests, elders, and teachers of religion, the entire Sanhedrin or Supreme Court, met to discuss their next steps. Their conclusion was to send YAOHUSHUA under armed guard to Pilate, the Roman governor. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Yahudim?" "Yes," YAOHUSHUA replied, "it is, as you say." Then the chief priests accused him of many crimes, and Pilate asked him, "Why don't you say something? What about all these charges against you?" But YAOHUSHUA said no more, much to Pilate's amazement. Now it was Pilate's custom to release one Yahudi or Jewish convict each year at Paschal or Passover time, anyone incarcerated that the people wanted to be pardoned. One of the prison inmates at that time was Barabbas, convicted along with others for murder during an insurrection. Now a mob began to crowd in toward Pilate, asking him to release a convict as usual. "How about giving you the king of the Yahudim?" Pilate asked. "Is he the one you want released?" For he realized by now that this was a frame-up backed by the chief priests because they envied the popularity of YAOHUSHUA. But at this point, the chief priests whipped up the mob to demand the release of Barabbas in place of YAOHUSHUA. "But if I release Barabbas," Pilate asked them, "what shall I do with this man you call your king?" And they yelled back, "Impale him!" "But why?" Pilate demanded. "What wrong has he committed?" They only roared the louder, "Impale him!" Then Pilate, afraid of a riot and eager to please the people, released Barabbas to them. And he ordered YAOHUSHUA flogged with a leaded whip and handed him over to be impaled. Then the Roman guards took him into the barracks of the palace, called out the entire palace guard, dressed him in a purple robe, and made a crown of long, sharp thorns and put it upon his head. Then they saluted, yelling, "Hail, King of the Yahudim!" And they beat him on the head with a cane and spat on him and went down on their knees to worship him. When they finally became tired of their sport, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him again and led him away to be impaled. Shameul of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country just at that moment, was pressed to carry the stake of YAOHUSHUA. Shameul is the father of Alexander and Rufus. And they brought YAOHUSHUA to a place called Golgotha, or the place of the skull. Wine drugged with bitter herbs was offered to him there, but he refused it. And then they impaled him and threw dice for his clothes. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning when the impalement took place, and a signboard was attached to the stake above his head announcing his crime, and it read, YAOHUSHUA Nusroti, King of the Yahudim. 2 robbers were also impaled that morning, one on his right, the other on his left. And so the scriptures was fulfilled that said, he was counted among criminals. The people jeered at him as they walked by and wagged their heads in mockery. Ha! Look at you now, they yelled at him. Sure, you can demolish the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. If you're so amazing, save yourself and come down from that stake. The chief priests and religious leaders were also watching around, joking about YAOHUSHUA. He's quite clever at saving others, they said, but he can't even save himself. Hey there, Messiah, they yelled at him. You, King of Yasharul, come on down from that stake and we'll believe you. And even the 2 robbers dying with him cursed him. About noon, darkness fell throughout the entire land until 3 o'clock that afternoon. Then YAOHUSHUA called out with a loud voice, Uli, Uli, lama sabachthani, or my Ul, why have you forsaken me? Some of the people watching there thought he was calling for the prophet Uliyahu. So one man ran and took a sponge and filled it with sour wine and held it up to him on a stick. Let's see if Uliyahu will come and take him down, he said. Then YAOHUSHUA uttered another loud cry and dismissed his rucha, or spirit. And the curtain in the temple was split apart from top to bottom. When the Roman officer there beside his stake saw how he dismissed his rucha, or spirit, he exclaimed, Truly, this was the Son of the Most High. Some women were there watching from afar. Mauroem of Magdala, Mauroem the mother of Yahuhukaf, the younger, and of Yahusaph, and Shuolema and others. They and many other Galilean women who were his followers had done service to him when he was up in Galilee, and had come with him to YAOHUSHUA Olei. This all happened the day before the Shabbos. Late that afternoon, Yahusaph from Arimathea, an honored member of the Yahudi Sanhedrin, who himself was eagerly expecting the arrival of Yahu's kingdom, gathered his courage and went to Pilate and asked for the body of YAOHUSHUA. Pilate couldn't believe that YAOHUSHUA was already dead, so he called for the Roman officer in charge and asked him. The officers confirmed the fact, and Pilate told Yahushua he could have the body. Yahushua bought a long sheet of linen cloth and, taking the body of YAOHUSHUA down from the stake, wound it in the cloth and laid it in a rock-hewn tomb, and rolled a boulder in front of the entrance. Mauro-M of Magdala and Mauro-M, the mother of Yahushua, were both watching as YAOHUSHUA was laid in the tomb. The next evening at sunset, when the day of Shabbos came to a close, Mauro-M of Magdala and Shua'olim and Mauro-M, the mother of Yahushua, went out and purchased embalming spices. Early the next morning, just upon sunrise, they brought them out to the tomb. On the way there, they were discussing how they could ever roll aside the huge boulder from the entrance. But when they arrived, they looked up and saw that the boulder, a very heavy one, was already moved away and the entrance was open. They then entered the tomb, and there on the right sat a youthful man clothed in white. The women were shocked, but the angel declared, "Don't be surprised. Aren't you looking for YAOHUSHUA Nuzroti, who was impaled? He is no longer here. He has come back to life. Look, that's where his body was lying. Now go and give this message to his disciples, including Cephas. YAOHUSHUA is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you before he died." The women fled from the tomb, trembling and bewildered, too frightened to talk. It was early in the morning of the first day of the week when YAOHUSHUA came back to life, and the first person who saw him was Mauro-M of Magdala, the woman from whom he had driven out 7 evil spirits. She found the disciples wet-eyed with grief and exclaimed that she had seen YAOHUSHUA and he was alive. But they didn't believe her. Later that day, he appeared to 2 who were walking from YAOHUSHUA into the country, but they didn't recognize him at first because he had changed his appearance. When they finally realized who he was, they rushed back to YAOHUSHUA to tell the others, but no one believed them. Yet later, he appeared to the 11 disciples as they were eating together. He rebuked them for their unbelief, their stubborn refusal to believe those who had seen him alive from the dead. And then he told them, "You are to go into all the world to proclaim the glorious message to everyone everywhere. Those who believe and are immersed will be saved, but those who refuse to believe will be condemned. And those who believe in my YAOHUSHUA name shall have the authority to drive out evil spirits, and they shall speak new languages. They will be able even to handle snakes with safety. And if they drink anything poisonous, it won't hurt them at all. And they will lay their hands on the sick, and they will get well. When YAOHUSHUA had finished talking with them, he was taken up into heaven and sat by Yahuwah's right hand. And the disciples went everywhere proclaiming. And Hamochiul, the king, was working with them and confirmed what they said by the miraculous signs that followed their messages.
Hashem, I said, Shemayim v'oreh. Etzo einai el tehorim, me'yayin yovoy ezi. Me'im Hashem, I said, Shemayim v'oreh. Al yitzilam v'raglecho, al yanim shoym recho. Raglecho, al yanim shoy merecho, hinne lo yanum veloyim shoy mer Yisroel, hinne lo yanum veloyim shoy mer Yisroel, shoy mer Yisroel, hinne lo yanum veloyim shoy mer Yisroel, shoy mer Yisroel. Lion, the Lord is Shomer Yisroel, Shomer Yisroel. Hinei lo yanum, the Lord Yikan, mer Yisroel. Eso enay el Hehorim meyayin yavot ezri nayim meyim Hashem oiser shemayim vorem al yitei lamois raglecho al yonum shoimerecho hinei lo yonum velo yishon shoimer Yisroel al yitei lamois raglecho al yonum shoimerecho hinei lo yonum velo yishon shoimer Yisroel hinei lo yonum velo yishon shoimer Yisroel shoimer Yisroel hinei lo yonum velo yishon shoimer Yisroel shoimer Yisroel hinei lo yonum velo yishon shoimer Yisroel shoimer Yisroel hinei lo yonum velo yishon shoimer Yisroel hinei lo yonum velo yishon shoimer Yisroel